Hello everyone, I'm Adrifting, and today I want to be talking about one of my favorite web novels of all time, Superstars of Tomorrow by Lazy Cliche. The original Chinese title is 未来天王, 未来translating to the future, and then 天王 just usually meaning king of. So like king of the future, Superstars of Tomorrow, pretty good translation. It's got 507 chapters, so it's a relatively decent length web novel, but we'll cover that in a little bit. Let's first go into the synopsis and tags. So here's the synopsis. Every time background music plays in my head, I feel like there's nothing to be afraid of. Fang Zhao. Toward the end of the apocalyptic period, Fang Zhao lost his life. However, instead of dying, he found himself 500 years later in the body of a young and aspiring composer who shared the same name. Having received his second chance at life, Fang Zhao sets out to achieve the previous owner's dreams. Armed with the experience of living through an apocalyptic age and his profession as a composer before that period, Fang Zhao uses his talent, wits, and knowledge to make his mark in the entertainment industry of the future. I don't know the correct pronunciation, Fang Zhao or Fang Zhao, but I'll usually use the latter. So the tags are reincarnation, transmigration, comedy style, overpowered protagonist, showbiz slash entertainment, and it's a futuristic setting, right? So I'll go over some of the genres and unique tropes and cliches, and then we'll get into more of the character and plot of the story, right? So Superstars of Tomorrow is one of my favorite web novels of all time because it's also one of my favorite genres, right? Which is urban life. And the great thing about urban life is that it's a familiar setting, right? Urban life is a very familiar setting, but there's a lot of different routes that urban life can take, right? There's romance, there's business. Um, the two ones I kind of want to focus on are more the skills, urban life, titles like A Valiant Life or The Monk Who Renounced Asceticism, which focuses on acquiring skills, usually through a system, usually the overpowered protagonist. It kind of goes through slice of life, right? The Monk Who Renounced Asceticism has a little bit of a more moral characteristics, a philosophical bent to it. Whereas Spearmint Great Lord's much more on the face lapping side, but A Valiant Life is just much more just entertainment, right? And the other type of slice of life is like entertainment industry, right? So the Korean or Japanese web novels, they go through the Korean and Japanese entertainment industries, right? Like God of Music or God of Cooking. Those are some of the Korean titles. But titles that I really enjoy, such as Full Time Artist, I Draw Comics Quietly, which is even based on the Japanese anime and manga Bakuman, which is all about the Japanese anime and manga industry, and director of the music department. And I only make bad movies. Hopefully, if I have time, we'll get to that one as well. But yeah, Superstars of Tomorrow really encompasses both of those genres of urban life, which is skills with that overpowered protagonist, but without a system. So this is a no system web novel, and it encompasses the entertainment industry where we explore. Whereas the more traditional web novel entertainment industries explore more about like the box office, the measures of success and wealth, right? And it goes through famous titles of movies, books, comics, literature, and art, right? As I said, business success, right? The accumulation of wealth. I think they really talk about the entertainment industry, right? Like the celebrity route, right? A lot of entertainment web novels, the movies, I think, 影视界, right, is roughly translates to 影业, the world of light and shadow, right? Because it just really goes in depth into the admiration of just the art industry, right? Literature, music videos, all that sorts of thing. So we have a rough baseline for like the entertainment and skills genre of urban life. And that's Superstars of Tomorrow. That's the space in which Feng Zhao occupies. So now going more in detail into the main character, right, Feng Zhao. Um, there's a couple things I want to pull from the synopsis, right? Like one is that he comes from the past. He comes from 500 years in the past, in fact, right? And a lot of these things with these transmigration is that when you're transmigrating from the past to the future or from the yeah, a lot of wuxia titles, right? Usually these are very capable characters, right? Some of them take on more historical characters. Popular historical characters include Lu Bu or Zhuge Liang, famous generals and strategists from the Three Kingdoms period, right? In fact, I think there's even a Chinese anime called Lu Bu in the modern day, where it explores Zhuge Liang in the modern day, where it explores how Zhuge Liang would react to modern society, right? It's very much looking through the lens of the future from a character in the past. The other thing about Fang Zhao is that because he was in this apocalyptic age, he was a soldier, right? So he's a lot of soldier-based skills. And the thing with a lot of soldier web novel cliches and tropes is that a lot of skills in the military don't necessarily translate well to skills that are required by society, right? Society has a different set of skills that they treasure and value, usually based in like intelligence, paperwork, a little bit more political management, um, cooperation and that sort, right? So a lot of soldiers, when web novels or even inspired by real life, when they get out of the military, they may be like supermodel soldiers, but they have to adapt to the flow of society, right? So they'll usually take up a business management position, right, or a law enforcement or bodyguarding position, right? A lot more fighting skills based. Or justice skill based, or orders skills based, or even just business management skills based, where like they have to deal with people, right? Because a lot of their skills don't necessarily translate well. So you see a lot of character growth and development and personal relationships and adapting to this way of life, right? And it's just so unique to see main characters navigate that, especially Feng Zhao, right? He's a unique protagonist. And a lot of soldier skills are like, although there are some soldier skills that translate over, right? Like FPS games or airsoft, right? Because this is the future, there are other skills as well, right? Like VR gaming, right? That opens up a lot of different possibilities. Even physical aspects of prowess, right? Like racing or driving and so on and so forth. Athleticism, like aerobics, martial arts, right? Like fighting, right? And another aspect of urban life is the face slapping genre, right? You see that with a lot of wuxia titles, right? Otherworldly Evil Monarch, one of my favorite web novels of all time, Star Ranked Hunter, but that's much more of a space opera, but I want to get into that. Even things like Counterfeit Hero, which is more space warfare, where a lot of the face slapping is much more direct. And in urban life, it's much more skill based, right? You show off your success rather than directly punching someone in the face, right? So that's why Superstars of Tomorrow and a lot of the slice of life genre is super cool, right? A Valiant Life, even losing money to be a tycoon, it just shows off success, um, in that style. There's a couple titles I do want to compare this web novel to. That's why I mentioned them. But yeah, so Feng Zhao has that apocalyptic background as a soldier, that style of thinking. But a unique aspect, and literally the first sentence, is that every time background music plays in his head, I feel like there's nothing to be afraid of. He always has background music playing in his head. This is a central point to his character. He's very passionate about music. And it confuses a lot of people, right? Because he's working in the entertainment industry. He starts off as an intern working at Silverwing, and it very much goes through a standard business template like you would see in a man's man business success, but then it, navigates and translates into the entertainment industry, like the world of celebrities, of luxury, high-end life and all that. But it's very much an urban life where, it's a little bit of like wish fulfillment and power fantasy, but it's more than just that, right? Some web novels go that pure wish fulfillment fantasy. That's the slice of life entertainment route. But a little bit larger than life, right? Accented Cinema did a great Superman video essay, but these characters aren't perfect, right? The way he navigates personal relationships still need to be improved. He has to go through various arcs of character development. But Feng Zhao is very passionate about music. And the body he transmigrates to, the previous owner, was also a musician. They have the same name, right? Because he did so well during the apocalyptic age as a soldier that, he was named in honor of him, right? Which is just a unique story point. And so Fang Zhao is suddenly thrust into this future world trying to navigate all the intricacies and admiring how much culture has evolved, how much things have changed, and there's an admiration towards science. There's a quote about big science I really want to put up. So that's why I mentioned that. But Fang Zhao gets to really take an outsider perspective, just as we as readers, looking at how much society has changed and what has improved, right? Um, Within the first 7 to 12 chapters, right? They talk about chapter 7 to chapter 12. in this futuristic setting, Fallen Saul is suddenly thrust into this position where he has to manage the VTuber department, which during the time this was written, like I'd assume in 2013, 2014, and even when it was being translated between 2016 and 2018, VTubers weren't a really big thing back then. I think this was probably roughly based on Hatsune Miku. But come 2019, 2020 to 2022, right, VTuber industry renaissance really blew up. And it was really cool to see how this futuristic futuristic web novel was super prophetic in that sense, kind of like Jules Verne with the moon and journeying to the center of the earth with the atmosphere and whatnot. Um, but yeah, it was really cool to see that prediction come true, and I was just really excited to see that in a web novel, right? Our main character, his standard overpowered uh, protagonist template and skill allows us to see our main character doing cool things and experiencing all these cool moments in life about passionate people. And this was a really fun web novel for me, really influential because I read this during high school, right? When you're doing a lot, but you're not really doing too much in terms of um, career advancement or improvement. So it was really cool to see, a main character getting to see, discover, and enjoy all these various passions, right? But while he has a lot of these skills, right? Some I would say even describe as peripheral, or maybe just skills that he isn't as passionate about because everyone pushes him toward different ways. He's trying to find himself as an intern in a company. Our main character is dead set on pursuing music. He has a passion for music and he is constantly studying and working hard toward pursuing that passion, even though he's talented in many other different ways. So it's very funny to see how a lot of characters misunderstand him. Maybe not like a direct misunderstanding, but like don't quite understand his motivations that we get to as a reader. And so that's where you get to see a lot of the comedy aspects of the character he meets, the various situations he put in. You'll meet a character called Curly Hair in the future. But yeah, so we get to see Fang Zhao being thrust into all these adventures and moments and character interactions and how he navigates through all of them in an urban life setting, right? That's really what urban life is all about, adventures and misadventures, and just seeing how all of that plays out, right? In terms of story progression, right? I say this is a relatively nice length story because it's only 507 chapters long, right? In comparison to some of the longer web novels like I Really Am a Superstar or The Monk Who Renounced Asceticism, those web novels can go for hundreds and hundreds of chapters. They can go even to the thousands, even, right? So Superstars of Tomorrow is relatively short, and it's also I think because the author um, because it was so short, it never really burnt itself out. Because a lot of web novels, they have their ups and downs, right? Their various arcs, like you would see in regular long form anime, like One Piece or Fairy Tail, right? There's just some arcs where it's great, and some arcs where it's much more plot or lore building, preparing for the next scene. And Superstars of Tomorrow has a very unique ending in that sense because you kind of sense around chapter 400, the author starts to take the web novel in a different direction. So it's a little bit unexpected, right? And I think the author kind of starts to run out of ideas or has an idea of how he wants to finish it, but is not quite sure how to get there. So he wants to throw in a couple more scenes. So it ends on this really weird scientific focused thing, but it's still very much urban life and phones all, but it ends a little bit differently than you would kind of expect. But I think it ends on a high note, right? Like stuff like starring Tunner, I Only Make Bad Movies, um, starring Tunner, I Only Make Bad Movies, Losing Money to Be a Tycoon. There's some great titles. Well, actually, Losing Money to Be a Tycoon, I didn't really like that. Starring Tunner and I Only Make Bad Movies, they have great endings because they were just really well written. They wrapped it up quite well. And then Superstars of Tomorrow, I think even though the ending is a little bit weaker, it still ends quite solidly. It ends on a high note. So I think it is worth finishing if you've gotten to that point already. It's a great story. Um, as I talked about the character, right? He is from 500 years in the past, so he has little bit of that past knowledge, and even the ways he sees himself through that lens impacts his character, right? His username is literally called "I'm alive after 500 years," right? The second to last chapter, the chapter title is something similar to that, akin to like "I'm alive after 500 years," which really goes to show that headspace or the way he perceives himself in that world, right? Maybe not quite fully a part of it, but he's slowly being integrated into it, and it's a really cool lens in which we see that, right? So this is much more wish fulfillment based. The other thing I want to talk about is how I was, whenever I talk about Fallen Samurai characters, the way I read web novels is like, I always say this is our main character. And there's a lot of influences to that, right? Like omniscient reader's viewpoint, um, Trash of the Count's family, but maybe some lesser known titles like The World After the Fall, The Villain Wants to Live, X ranks supporter's role in the prestigious academy. Surviving the academy, right? Authors, POV, novels, extra, all those omniscient readers' viewpoint, like genres, right? Omniscient reader's viewpoint is one of the biggest web novel shifts back when it was translated in 2018. Really huge. And it's also one of the reasons talking about that is actually going to explain to me why I don't necessarily cover more mainstream web novels like The Legendary Mechanic, Lord of Mysteries, Release That Witch, because because they're so great, because they're so mainstream, I have hope that someone will cover it, right? And I think they'll do a much better job than I can, right? Someone of great renown that I greatly respect in the AniTuber industry covered Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, Garnt or Gaunt. He did a great job of that. So I thought I'd do a lot better if I contribute by exploring maybe lesser known titles like the world, like a lot of people know Solo Leveling, but I don't think a lot of people are aware of The World After the Fall, right? uh, Seal Station Necromancer, Emperor of Solo Play, and even some of the other titles I mentioned earlier, right? The Villain Wants to Live, Surviving the Academy. The one I really want to cover in the Omniscient Reader's viewpoint space, right, alongside like author's POV, the novel's extra, is X rank supporters role in the Academy. So if I ever get time, I'll probably cover that. And in terms of the wish fulfillment aspect, one of the other web novels really wanted to compare Superstars of Tomorrow is two in particular: Losing Money to Be a Tycoon and I Only Make Bad Movies. So let's start off with I Only Make Bad Movies. I think I talked about this before, but I Only Make Bad Movies alongside full-time artist, director, I Draw Comics Quietly, director of the music department, is really like those type of stories. Some of them, like full-time artist, is very much just a love story talking about their favorite movies growing up, right? It's literally like a cinephile's wish fulfillment story, and it's great to see all that like moments of historical culture and just exploring both the historic aspect as well as that business accumulation aspect, the business urban life setting, but combined with the entertainment setting. So I Only Make Bad Movies is a great inspirational web novel. Losing Money to Be a Tycoon is much more in the wish fantasy setting with a system and just an overpowered protagonist doing interesting and unique things. So that's why I always said those web novels are really cool. Those are very influential because like Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint or Losing Money to Be Tycoon, they really change the way you can tell these type of stories, right? Like the prodigal son one, the prodigal there's another title somewhere, Losing Money to Tycoon, that was translated at the same time, was like the prodigal son or whatever, right? Usually there's often titles that come out at the same time or translate at the same time, The Great Thief and The Thief Who Roamed the World, right? But Superstars of Tomorrow occupies this really unique space of like futuristic. There's still some cool space settings, right? Like I mentioned, Star Ranked Hunter, even Counterfeit Hero had a great space setting. Counterfeit Hero is much more space wuxia and face lapping if that's more your style. Otherworldly Evil Monarchs, much more wuxia based. But Superstars of Tomorrow was just such a unique web novel for me, right? Even the translator, Beto Barker, did a great job at picking it up before he moved to web novel. I think with Atlas Studios or something. I don't really know how the Gravity Tales acquisition went, but like a lot of titles got moved over, The Human Emperor and whatnot. But Superstars of Tomorrow holds a very special place in my heart, much like all the other web novels I covered, right? Godfather of Champions, The Great Storyteller, the science fiction Tomorrow Hasn't Arrived, and I Live in Nanjing. A lot of web novels I cover is because I really enjoyed them and I really want to showcase them. Like, The World After the Fall and Isaac are great candidates, more just if I have the energy to do so. But yeah, Superstars of Tomorrow is really great. It's very comedy slice of life. So it's a very casual web novel if you want to read something and have fun, enjoy reading it instead of something very maybe more mature or dark, like Kill the Hero or The Gamer, where like you constantly have your main character fighting for their lives, pursuing some great goal. Superstars of Tomorrow is much more casual and it's much more enjoyable, where there's not so many high stakes as much as is here's a fun story and you're gonna have fun reading this. And that's why I really like Superstars of Tomorrow. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it was just a really enjoyable read. So I really wanted to share one of my favorite web novels with you guys, and that's really all I have to say. That's so yeah, that's Superstars of Tomorrow, and we'll stop here.